And now, for something completely different. It didn't take long for pop culture to quickly absorb the life and acts of the ghoulish butcher of Plainfield. Ed Gein was one of those troubled individuals with a whole host of mental problems, from mommy issues to gender identity. Gein, although often mistakenly labeled a serial killer by the general public, in fact only killed 2 people, Mary Hogan in 54 and Bernice Worden in 57. No, Gein was more into the whole grave robbing scene, digging up corpses that he felt matched his mother's description. He used these bodies to furnish his home, making chairs, soup bowls, lampshades, belts, whatever he wanted out of the body parts. And just a couple of miles away from where Gein was living, Robert Bloch was wrapping up his novel Psycho. And in one of the final chapters, he even alludes to some Geinish notions. The idea that your next-door neighbor may be a psychopathic person with a hunger for flesh, especially if you're staying in a small, gossipy town where everybody knows everybody. I mean, it's pretty weird how the idea of a murderous grave robber not wanting all their neighbors to know what they're up to was a pretty novel idea in the 50s. But I guess we live and we learn. After Gein's arrest and trial, it didn't take long for the shadow he cast to influence others. Most notably, of course, are Psycho,
Uncut, intact, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho,
and Silence of the Lambs.
The killer is on the loose.
Keeps them alive for 3 days. Then he shoots them, skins them, and dumps them.
Both based on the books of the same name. But the one that I always found strangely magnetic, gut-churningly dirty, gritty, and real feeling is Tobe Hooper's 1974 The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Just as terrifying as being there.
Now, since Hooper's 74 masterpiece, there have been quite a few sequels, reboots, remakes, reimaginings, almost each time with a new spin on the Leatherface mythos. So join me as I take a look at the many faces of Leatherface. In Mr. Face's first outing as a masked madman, as portrayed by Gunnar Hansen, he shows himself to the audience in 3 distinct flavors. First, there is the classic butcher outfit. Probably the most iconic outfit, and what Leatherface would probably wear to work, back when working may have been a thing for him and his family. This version of Leatherface, and the Sawyer clan of course, all come from the town's former meat industry. The butcher-slash-killer Leatherface mask appears to be quite old and dried out, and is what I would assume is what he would refer to as his working man's face. In this same film, we also see Leatherface wearing his old woman face, along with a cloth apron instead of his usual leathery butcher apron. The last visage he dons in this film is the Pretty Woman mask, along with a dark suit and tie, this one being used to dress up fancy for dinner. Because you gotta look pretty when you're cannibalizing young people with your deranged family. In the first sequel from 1986, which is far crazier and gorier than the original, is the first time that Leatherface is given a name. First name for now. So, meet Bubba Leatherface Sawyer.
Bubba likes her. Bubba's got a girlfriend!
Portrayed primarily by Bill Johnson, the face worn here is a bit more stitched up, and along with a fancy schmancy tuxedo that was probably snatched off of a corpse, this Leatherface is a bit more of a romantic goofball. But I guess you could have figured that out for yourself just by looking at the poster. Again, Leatherface is not the only one to be worried about in Texas, as his family takes center stage in all the macabre festivities.
I got a real good eye for prime meat. Runs in the family.
Just keep in mind there's a bit of a tonal shift between this film and its predecessor. Third in the line is 1990's Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which is almost a soft reboot of the franchise. I say this because of the opening crawl. They clearly mention stuff from the first movie, but this one does introduce us to a fresh incarnation of Leatherface, as played by R.A. Meyerhoff. The Leatherface incarnation seen here, who they call Junior, has a distinctly dirty look about him, with a puffier mask, shaggier hair, a set of brown clothes. He struts his stuff while also wearing a leg brace. Something we can assume is from an older injury, perhaps? He even gets his hands on the most pimped out chainsaw that would make Ash Williams quiver with envy.
Groovy.
Plus a whole new Sawyer family. Hence the almost soft reboot statement. But yeah, you heard me. Here we get a whole new batch of crazy cannibals for you, including a matriarchal figure, Leatherface's daughter, some strapping young lads,
Look here, Mama. Colored drawers.
plus a return from the nearly mummified bag of fun that is Grandpa. Coming up fourth, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, where Leatherface, played by Robert Jacks, is again joined by a new family, the Slaughter family. And yeah, I know it's a very catchy name and not cheesy in the slightest. Instead of Leatherface, Bubba, or Junior, this time he simply goes by the name Leather. Way to dehumanize your pet monster man, Slaughter family. His hair is even shaggier than before and is dressed in army fatigues with a bright yellow apron for most of the film. Except for when his grandma and pretty lady persona come out again.
You sit the fuck down!
Again, it's almost as if they wanted a soft reboot. But mention of the prior films is brought up in the opening again, as crazy new concepts are introduced here, like Matthew McConaughey's leg.
Better, stronger, faster.
And the family's even crazier than before, and even have some secret society ties. Now, the fifth Texas Chainsaw film from 2003 is the first official remake/reboot of the franchise. So I guess I can't really complain about Leatherface getting another new family. This time, instead of the Sawyers or the Slaughters, this family is called the Hewitts, with Leatherface now going by the name Thomas Brown Hewitt, and is played by Andrew Brian Yarsky. This version is the most hulking of the Leatherfaces, and we're the angriest looking version of the Leatherface mask so far. Oh, except for when he's wearing that other guy's freshly cut off face in order to torment those damn pesky kids. This Leatherface doesn't seem to wear different masks to differentiate his personalities, but instead uses them as a way to cover up his skin condition that has left him deformed and sans nose. Now, controversially, I think this Leatherface might be one of the more developed Leatherfaces, as he also gets a prequel movie that dives into his backstory. 2006's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning is where we discover Leatherface was, adopted, rescued, found in the trash after his birth mother died.
That's the ugliest thing I ever saw.
So not only do we get the origins of Tommy Boy here, but also his family, and how they all became what they are. Leatherface is again played by Andrew Brian Yarsky, and is mostly seen wearing a muzzle-type mask, but he does eventually get his hands on a new face that he quickly dons as his own.
I like your new face.
Next, we get our first proper fracture of the timeline, with 2013's Texas Chainsaw 3D, a direct sequel to 1974's original, ignoring everything that has come after that. Here, Leatherface is once again renamed. He is, yet again, however, a Sawyer, but this time goes by the name of Jedediah. Herein, the family is mostly a thing of the past, due to mob justice. And with his maternal figure dying, leaving Jed here sort of, in the care of his cousin? His young cousin. Did anyone here bother to look at a calendar when they made this thing? Anyway, Jed here wears a snazzy red shirt.
The first one is dangerous, aggressive.
And sometimes a nice orange shirt.
This one is, yam. It's very fashionable, a little bold, and, just a tad zany.
Along with a very old decrepit face mask, a little bit more remnant of Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 3. Honestly, this might be one of the least fun ones of the franchise, and I have very little to say about it. But don't worry, the next one is another prequel. Wait, what? Yep, another prequel. This one going before the original, and is the only one I have to give a spoiler warning for, so if you care about the identity of Mr. Face, consider yourself warned. Now, you think Leatherface would be played by this hulking piece of man we see over here. Because a lot of that would make sense, right? Hulking, strong, in a reformatory. But he is in fact played by this guy here, Sam Strike, who depicts the young Leatherface before all the Leatherface stuff happens. Still a Sawyer named Jed, the family is back and just as crazy as ever, gifting Jed his chainsaw as a wee boy, until he ended up getting taken away from his family and getting renamed to Jackson.
Send some units over to the Sawyer house. You round up all the miners. I want all of them.
He doesn't start to get the iconic Leatherface look until closer to the end of the film, when a stray bullet mangles his jaw, causing him to need some heavy stitches and a leather harness to kinda just keep his face all in place. That is until he gets his hands on his chainsaw and his new favorite hobby of making masks out of young people. And now our last entry for the many faces of Mr. Thomas Jedediah Sawyer Hewitt Bubba Leatherface Jr. is again a direct sequel. Well, a legacy sequel to the original. Again, you know that thing that Halloween 2018 did, where you ignore everything that came after the original, and you reintroduce old characters and an old prop? Anyway, our last entry shows us where a 70-something-year-old Leatherface ended up, which seems to be an orphanage. Okay, I just have to assume his entire family died again? This Leatherface, played by Mark Burnham, is being cared for by the Borg Queen, who seems to be keeping him in check and not murderous.
Baby, I'm fine. I'm all right. Just go back to your room.
Until he becomes unchecked and very murderous. He is maskless for the first chunk of the movie, but quickly finds himself a replacement face thanks to Mommy Dearest, which he uses to torment the social media people that have invaded his town.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
I'm sure Mama would be proud, boy. Although this mask isn't quite, all that leathery yet, it's still pretty cool, despite its droopiness. Now for my final thoughts. With all the current masks looked at, it is unknown what the future of Leatherface holds. With things like comics, toys, and video games being factors to consider, who knows how many alterations and variations there will be to our old leather friend here within the coming years. But more importantly, maybe it's time that we give this franchise a proper rest. After all, it has been going on for quite a few years. There's a lot of back catalog these guys still have, so I feel we don't always need a new installment. But hey, I'll still always watch these new movies they put out, even if I end up just getting angry at them, I guess. But you know, I'm probably just too curious about horror for my own good. Well, that is all from me, and I hope to see you again next time.